We'll take a look at what's going on in the United States. We're joined now by our man in Washington, columnist EJ Dionne. I'm very pleased to say that EJ Dionne is not in Washington this morning. He's right here in our breakfast studio. He's here in this country for the Australian-American Leadership Dialogue. EJ, what a treat.
Oh, it's so good to be in this studio for a change. And I've been traveling around the country with my family, and now they have been infected by a love for Australia, too.
That's excellent news. EJ, before we plunge into the troubles the president's having with his healthcare reforms, I wonder what you think about the relationship that's developing, or is there one developing between our man and yours, between Kevin Rudd and Barack Obama?
There's a natural affinity between them. We were talking before the show about Kurt Campbell, who's been very familiar with Australia, who works in the administration, talked about how this is one of the closest relationships, and Kurt would know that. I've sort of looked at it from the partly from the outside and seen two people who got elected in much the same way, whose campaigns were very similar in terms of dividing their country along generational lines. They both have very strong support among the young. And their policy agenda is very similar. To pick up an Australian paper and read about your debate about global warming and emissions trading it's a very familiar debate to us because it's very similar to the one we're having. So the priorities are similar. Their orientations as kind of moderate center-left leaders are similar. So it's a kind of natural alliance. Not unlike Howard, John Howard and George Bush, but obviously on the other side of politics.
Howard and Bush was a very warm relationship. They obviously hit it off as friends too. I mean, John Howard describes George Bush as a friend. Do you think that sort of chemistry is likely to be there between Obama and Rudd?
I don't think it's there yet, but I think it's certainly, I see it as very possible because, in terms of the way they like to describe issues, the way they like to turn ideas around, turn alternatives around, I think they are quite similar. So I think they certainly seem to get on when the Prime Minister visited Washington recently.
Your president sure has a lot on his plate right now, not least of which is the healthcare pledge. That was his big pledge. It's what he stood for when he ran for president. Can he afford to fail?
No, he can't. He cannot lose this fight. He knows that. And I think even the Democrats, who are somewhat divided on this, know that he and they cannot afford to lose this, partly because 15 years ago when President Bill Clinton lost the healthcare fight, it had a devastating effect on the Democratic Party. So I think they will get something. But healthcare is, there's a kind of sickness, if you will, in our healthcare debate, because while lots of people, as that piece of tape you played showed, want the system to change, know there are injustices to the system, there's a lot of mistrust of government. And there's a belief that however bad it is, if the government intervenes, it might only make it worse. And then there are a lot of half-truths being circulated about this plan, that death panel quotation from Sarah Palin. There is a provision in the House version of this bill that encourages senior citizens who have very serious illnesses to have discussions with their doctors about long-term, how they're going to deal with it in the long term. There's nothing about euthanasia, nothing at all along those lines, but people have grabbed that provision, distorted it, and turned it into what Sarah Palin did in that statement.
Yeah, what do you make of Sarah Palin's intervention like that?
Well, there is a body of opinion on the right, a small body of opinion that is trying to sort of use this as a club to kill the healthcare plan. There are other provisions that people are going to use as a kind of wedge to kill the plan. I'm not surprised that she did what she did. It's sort of representative of her part of politics.
EJ, something I really want to get your view on is the outburst from the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton this week. We're just going to remind ourselves of it. Maybe some people listening haven't heard it. She was on this trip to Africa. She took a question from a student in Kinshasa who was asking, well, Hillary Clinton thought anyway, not for the Secretary of State's view, but for the view of her husband, Bill Clinton. Now, it turns out it was a mistranslation, and the question actually wanted to know what the president thought, but Hillary Clinton got a translation and she was not happy about the question. Let's hear her response.
We've all heard about the Chinese contracts in this country. Their interferences from the World Bank. What does Mr. Clinton think through the mouth of Mrs. Clinton?
Wait, you want me to tell you what my husband thinks? My husband is not the Secretary of State. I am. So you ask my opinion, I will tell you my opinion. I'm not going to be channeling my husband.
Woohoo! U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in no uncertain terms. Why did she respond like that. What's that about?
Well, you gave me a thought I want to carry around for weeks earlier in the show. A limerick a day keeps the cliches away. And I started, the Secretary of State was mad. The reference to Bill made her sad. Fortunately, I didn't finish the limerick. I think that what you're seeing here is some obvious sensitivity on Hillary Clinton's part, both to the fact that she came to prominence in politics in a very unusual way. She was the wife of a former president of the United States who recently got a lot of attention for what he did in North Korea, freeing those journalists.
Do you think that might have been playing into this sensitivity here?
I think that's possible. And then there is also the fact that she actually wanted the job Barack Obama had. So there was a lot going on here. I was struck within a couple of hours yesterday here in Sydney. It shows how polarizing Hillary Clinton is, even here in Australia. I got two diametrically opposed reactions. One view that she shouldn't have gotten angry. This didn't help her at all, and I think she probably thinks that now, and was very critical of her. The other view was that, look, she stood up for herself. She has a right to be proud of her public record. She is the Secretary of State, and so it was a natural response. I think Hillary Clinton always sort of draws those responses, those polarized responses. In the end, I don't think this is going to mean much, and I suspect she wishes she had waited for a retranslation and had answered a little more calmly.
At some point, it was always perhaps going to come, though. She needed to stomp on the head of her husband to make that clear, that she is not her husband's puppet.
Right, and I don't think anyone actually believes she's Bill Clinton's puppet. I mean, she's a very independent, smart woman.
EJ, we're running out of time, incredibly. Just briefly, what do you make of Obama's first 200 days?
On the whole, I think it's been successful. The economy is finally starting to emerge from the mess. That will help his popularity. But our country was divided politically before he went in, and it still is, as the healthcare fight shows.
Okay, EJ, thanks very much. It's fantastic to have you here in the
flesh.
flesh.
It's great to be here.
And we can look forward to a continuing relationship that lasts for many, many years. EJ Dionne is our guy in Washington. He's also a columnist with the Washington Post, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and he's here in Australia for the Australian-American Leadership Dialogue, which kicks off over the next couple of days.